Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our final Tariff and Trade webinar of 2025. We have done these every Friday morning since the spring, and we really appreciate you joining us each week. And we hope that the information that's been provided has been helpful to you and your companies as we've navigated this crazy year together. We are planning to continue this webinar into next year. So we'll take the next couple of weeks off, but please plan to join us again on January 9th. For today, we will, of course, hear from Ben Kolendar with some tariff and trade updates, who keeps our website updated. Maybe for the next couple of weeks, the website will be a little less updated, so Ben can take some time off, but we'll hear from him today. And I am very excited about our guest speaker for today. You will be very glad that you took the time to join us this morning. John Huber from Greenberg Traurig is the former United States Attorney for the District of Utah and a board member of World Trade Center Utah. And he is joining us along with his colleague, Laura Rabinowitz, who is the chair of Greenberg Traurig's New York International Trade Practice. So get excited to hear from her shortly. As a reminder, as always, these are recorded, and you can always check our our YouTube page to see past sessions. And please feel free to chime in with questions. You can enter those in the Q&A, and we'll be glad to answer those. So Ben, what happened this week?
Great, thanks. And first of all, I'd like to give a shout out to our colleague Lena, who's taken over a lot of the dashboard responsibilities. It's a heavy burden, and she's carried it well. But this week, actually, I'm going to share my screen here. We don't have a ton of updates, so I will take the opportunity to just briefly run through, the tariff dashboard and just remind everybody. Our website is wtcutah.com/tariff, so you can go here anytime to see the latest. It's also got our Friday webinars, so if you want to join these or share this information with another business that you're aware of or a colleague who may be interested in joining and hearing these updates, you could just share our webpage, and the link to it is at the top. So as you can see here, there's not a ton of activity for this week. Our latest update on an action is on December 10th. So this week has been pretty quiet. One notable exception to that is Switzerland. So we did receive the CSMS. It's just on our deals section. So you could scroll over to the next tab right here, and then you can see the CSMS was released for Switzerland. We moved that over from the tariff page to the deals page now that there's a deal in place, because these tariffs are just part of the standard IEEPA. We just know a lot of folks were interested in those updates and wanted them tracked in this briefing. So to just highlight a few, we haven't heard a ton about Brazil, Switzerland, India this week. So we don't have a ton to report there. We always like to give some updates on the poly market and what the betting odds are on these tariffs. This is no indication one way or another of how things will go, but for some folks, money's on the line. So it is a, maybe somewhat clearer indication of a crystal ball here. And this week, we're up to 28% of a likelihood that these tariffs will become legal by the Supreme Court. And this typically fluctuates, at least since the oral arguments, between 23 and 28%. So it's a little bit on the high end right now. We'll see if it breaks through that 28%. And more notably, I would say there's a 1% chance that the betting market is saying that these tariffs are going to result in refunds by a Supreme Court decision. So just a couple more things before I hand it off. We've got some 232s that we remind everybody of every webinar until they come through. We're tracking semiconductors, which appears to be delayed still, critical minerals, commercial aircrafts, and jet engines. All of these three from the 232 list were released in April or early May. And so the timeline for those to come through in terms of starting to have some actions roll through will be anytime now. So we'll continue to track, but haven't seen much movement on those fronts this week either. But we'll keep everybody updated on those as they roll through. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to John and wrap up on the updates for the week.
Well, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Michelle, for introducing us and helping us get to do this today. It's a great privilege. So, as Michelle mentioned, I'm the former U.S. attorney and had the great privilege of serving as a presidential appointee by two presidents of two different parties. President Obama, I appointed me, and then when President Trump came in his first term, he reappointed me. And so, I don't know if you believe in Sasquatch, but this might help you believe that there might be such a creature out there because I'm one of them. And depending on the clients who I'm talking to, I either have President Obama over my shoulder or I just shift to have President Trump over my shoulder. So maybe today we'll stick with President Trump since he's in office. Um, so after three decades or so of government service, it was a great privilege to enter private practice and help Greenberg Traurig, which is my law firm, a global law firm, one of the largest law firms on the planet Earth, set up their office in Salt Lake City about 5 years ago. And we like to think that we were the first global law firm to get a beachhead here in Utah because of such attractive economy that we've all been blessed by. And so I've been working with them ever since. And one of the first partnerships that I formed was with World Trade Center Utah. And as Michelle mentioned, I've been a board member for about 4 years now. And it's been a great privilege to help Utah companies have access to such global legal talent. And that's what I really want to offer as an ambassador of Utah to help Utah companies and individuals have access to world-class talent that really wasn't in Utah prior to about 5 years ago. Today, we'll have a sample of that. Um, our firm has offices worldwide, in the Middle East, Europe, all through the United States, Latin America, and Asia, and continue to grow with all these offices. We have about 3,000 subject matter legal experts around the world. And it is the rarest scenario when we haven't seen or had experience with an opportunity, a challenge, or an obstacle in the business world across the planet, and especially here in the United States. Today, we are going to be greatly benefited from hearing from one of my colleagues from New York City. Miss Laura Rabinowitz is the leader of our chair of our New York International Trade Practices, has extensive experience from her very beginning in her career as working in the Customs Chief Counsel's office for the United States government. And with that foundation, went into private practice and has had extraordinary experience with multinational importers, exporters, manufacturers, retailers, on and on. And she's been recognized at the highest levels for her at the international level and at the national level for her work with international trade and customs. That's the high caliber person who we can give you access to through your conduit here. Like, here's my office right in Salt Lake City. I'm a lifetime Utahn, proud Utahn, live on the west side of the valley, and that a guy on the west side of the valley can have access to professionals like Laura to help you and advise you on these opportunities we have and challenges, or however you want to view it, with the tariffs. So today I thought it would be a great match to have Laura join us and offer some unique perspective that I don't think you get every day in Utah, in Salt Lake City. So we welcome Laura, and I'd like to introduce her and let her take off with her presentation.
Great. John, thank you so much for that really gracious, incredibly gracious introduction. And Ben, thank you for the updates on the tariffs for the week and what's been going on. So that was really helpful to me. So I know that everyone on the line is really very well educated. And I mean, I can't believe that you've been having weekly updates on tariffs. So what that says to me is that this is really impacting companies in Utah, the tariffs, and it's been financially burdensome for companies, and to date, they're in place. So I have a short PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk fast. So Andrea, if you could bring it up, that'd be great. So I'm going to...
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble sharing it.
Oh, okay. Let me do it. I can do it. Oh, wait. I have to share my screen.
Did that work?
Shoot, I'm sorry. Wait a second.
Looks like we've got it up, Laura, and
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Then I'm going to stop. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next slide. So I'm gonna go through this very quickly because you've been having these great updates from Ben. So we had the first Trump administration starting in July of 18. The administration put tariffs on just products of China. About 2/3 of the products of China carry an additional 25% or 7.5%. That was kept in place by the Biden administration. They're still in place. And then when we have the second Trump administration starting in February, the president put on additional tariffs pursuant to the International Economic Emergency Powers Act on products of China first. This was due to the fentanyl crisis. That was in February. And then in March, Canada and Mexico, unless the goods are USMCA compliant. And then in April, the administration rolled out country-specific tariffs. So this is all components, all raw materials, all finished products, regardless of country of origin, now have an additional tariff. So all merchandise that comes into the US has general duty attached to it and duty rates. Some merchandise does come in free of duty, but duty rates go over 40% and they're product specific. That's the general duty. Now, in addition, starting in the second Trump administration, February for China, Canada, and Mexico in March, and then the rest of the world in April, there are country specific rates. So here I have a chart of the country rates. And we have 2 slides. You can go to the next slide. Some of the highlights, and then countries have negotiated and the rates have changed. So the European Union is now up to 15%. It's a blended rate. It's sort of it's not in addition to, it's cumulative. Japan also, the UK is at 10%, but Taiwan is at 20%. Vietnam is at 20%. Switzerland was originally at 39%. It's just now, we can actually change this slide. It was just announced this week, as Ben mentioned in the message, it went down to 15% and it's retroactive to November 14th. But this has been, as you know, very burdensome on companies. So that's what the administration did when they first came into office. And then next slide, in addition to the country-specific tariffs, you can go to the next slide. And we're going to send the slides out so you all can go through it, at your leisure. In addition to the country-specific tariffs, the administration also has rolled out these sectoral tariffs. If you've been on the line for your weekly calls, then you know these, and Ben was just talking about them. So this is what's in place to date. And I see on your website you have a great resource too. So this is duplicative, but you can see, and products that have sectoral tariffs do not now have the reciprocal tariffs, the country specific. But this impacts steel, aluminum, copper, lumber, upholstered furniture, kitchen cabinets, and there's more to come. And one of the difficulties of these sectoral tariffs is the derivative lists that come with it. So when they are announced, like when steel was originally announced, and it's 50%, which is pretty onerous, 50%, this is of the steel content of the imported merchandise. But in addition to that, you have to look at, it's not all steel. You have to look at the list of derivative products. So steel, stainless steel, kitchen counters, sinks, windows, door frames, those are on the derivative list too. And the other thing is that the derivative lists for all of the sectoral tariffs are updated periodically throughout the year. So the last time the steel list was updated, 400 additional products were added. So that, again, that's another burden on a company. You have to, be on top of the list. You might not be on the steel list now, but the next time, and we're expecting the next list to be released in January. Next slide, please. And then here you see the other ones that are in effect and the other ones that are under investigation. And I know you've been following the semiconductors. And so, so they have a twofold strategy, this administration, the country-specific tariffs and then the sectoral. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here the big elephant in the room is the Supreme Court case. It's gotten a lot of publicity. This is specific on the country-specific tariffs. The sectoral tariffs are not at issue in the case before the Supreme Court. There were only a handful of plaintiffs, 5 or so, handful of plaintiffs, including some attorney, maybe a little bit more, including some state attorney generals. So this is only, as I said, on the country-specific tariffs. The sectoral tariffs, which were rolled out under a different statute, those are not at issue in this case. And in my view, they're litigation proof. They're here to stay. The statute the administration used there required an investigation, which they did, short as it may have been. There was an investigation, a Federal Register notice. It was under a different statute. IEEPA, I think, was rolled out. It was a never used statute for imposing tariffs, and it was rolled out very, very quickly. This was a priority of the administration, and they rolled it out very quickly. And I think we're, based on comments and the briefing schedule, it seems that we're going to have the Supreme Court opinion by the middle of January, which would be really good because there's so much uncertainty in this gray area where we have the action filed, we've had the oral arguments, but we're waiting on the opinion. And I think the administration thinks that the court is going to determine that the administration did exceed their authority in promulgating the tariffs under IEEPA. And they say, should the Supreme Court strike down IEEPA, we will do the refund process, and we'll talk about that. And then in the next half of the sentence, whether it's Besant or Lutnick or the USTR, Greer, we're ready to go with our second strategy, which is additional sectoral tariffs. So they are prepared. Now, there are a number of cases, and as I said, the Costco case got some publicity for filing. I think, and there was a lower court, that would say that would be my only tariff update from this week, was a Court of International Trade decision based on a motion for a preliminary injunction brought by Costco and the other plaintiffs. And the court struck it down. They denied the motion. So I think from the Court of International Trade decision this week, it seems clear that cases do not need to be filed today in the Court of International Trade, pending the decision by the Supreme Court. If companies are just too nervous, I understand wanting to file, and we're prepared to file for companies, but we're really gearing up. I know you gave the betting odds. I'm in the camp that the court is going to strike down IEEPA and say that the administration exceeded their authority, and there will be a refund process. And I'm really waiting for clarity from the court on what that process is. I think most likely there will be a judicial aspect to it, and companies will have to file an action, but it would be under a residual jurisdiction. But as I said, until we have the opinion, I don't think that an action needs to be filed. But we're ready to go, and I advise companies, if they have paid significant IEEPA duties, this is the time to get prepared with your list of entries. Your customs broker can help you pull that data. We've put together a template of what data would be needed, but because customs refunds are they are entry specific, date specific, and then you want to know how much duty you've paid, how much IEEPA duty you've paid. So, and then companies also should keep track of date of liquidation, and that's the customs term of art of when an entry is finalized. It's finalized about 11 months after date of entry. So the February entries are just now starting to be finalized, but the later ones, the ones that are impacted starting in April, mostly are not finalized. There could be some one-offs that are. So any questions about the IEPA case, I'm happy to answer those. I'm going to talk for another 5 minutes and then we're going to take questions. So in the meantime, whether IEPA is struck down or it's kept in place, companies should work on trying to mitigate their duty exposure. Next slide, please. Next slide. So currently, duty is based on what is the classification of the goods, what is the value of the goods, what is the invoice price, and what is the value declared to U.S. Customs, and now what is the country of origin? The country of origin never mattered before the tariffs on China in the first Trump administration. So unless your free trade agreement is separate. So, right, it depends. If you're in Vietnam, you're at 20%. If you're in Switzerland, now you're at 15%. EU, 15%. China, significantly higher. So we work with companies on trying to, in a legal way, try to move their classification from one provision to another to make it advantageous from a duty perspective. That's the general duty. And valuation, instead of paying duty on $10 a unit, is there a legal way to make it $8 a unit? Next slide, please. Next slide. So free trade agreements are a great way to save on duty if you can comply. It's currently under negotiation, USMCA with Canada and Mexico. Next slide. There are a number of legal deductions, kind of like an accountant functions, legal deductions that can be taken from the value that's declared to customs. And here's a list of some of those. Then, of course, it's, depending on what the product is and what the supply chain is. But it's really important that companies have visibility into their supply chain and know what the value is based on. Next slide, please. These are additional, one way to save if there's a product, let's say, that has software in it, right? Some more advanced products have software. So that significantly increases the value of a product. And valuation is determined as what is condition at importation. So we work with companies, if you can upload the software post-importation into the US, then the value is much lower. So things like that, we're trying to be very creative in a compliant way to help companies reduce that exposure. Next slide, please. Okay, first sale, it's a way to structure the transaction, which significantly, and whether the IEPA tariffs are struck down and we're just stuck with general duty, because general duty is still up to over 40%, as I said, for some products. So first sale is a way to structure the transaction, which reduces the unit price. Next slide, please. Here you can see the structure. You need 3 parties, 2 sales. So basically with first sale, we're reducing, an importer has to pay duty on the value of the components, the labor, and the factory has to make a profit. But we're shaving off any of that middleman profit. That is not dutiable. So we go back to the factory invoice rather than the invoice from the middleman to the importer. The next slide, please. As you can see here, the U.S. importer still pays the middleman the higher amount. This is you order the goods at $20 a unit to a middleman. The middleman issues a purchase order to the factory, which actually manufactures the good at $16 a unit. The importer would still pay the middleman $20, but they're only paying duty on the $16. This has been in the courts, in the trade courts, and accepted by U.S. Customs since the mid-1990s. Next slide, please. And it can be done with either related parties or unrelated parties. but you need 3 entities and 2 sales. And even companies that say we'd work directly with the supplier, sometimes the supplier has another entity, either related or unrelated, where we can route through that other party to save on duties. Next slide, please. Okay, these are other duty mitigation strategies. Next slide. You can see this. Yeah, next slide. Forced labor until the second Trump administration was the #1 enforcement issue for U.S. Customs. Next slide. And it's still a major issue. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to just say one thing here. The third bullet I should have put in highlight. U.S. Customs has been very clear that in this administration, their enforcement is up. We've seen it. I mean, it's all anecdotally. They're not releasing figures on this, on increased audits and requests on specific shipments, but we know it's up. And then at the end of the summer, DOJ, John's former agency, and Department of Homeland Security partnered to create a trade fraud task force. And the DOJ criminal division said they at the beginning of the year issued a memo to all staff on what are their enforcement priorities for the year, and trade fraud was #3 on their list of enforcement priorities. So this is, the criminal aspect, the DOJ aspect, that's new for customs enforcement. Next slide, please. Yeah, just something to keep in mind. If an importer does discover a violation, prior disclosures can be filed, and that would protect against a penalty. Next slide, please. Oh, and that's it. I spoke very, very fast. all my years living in New York.
Laura, I'm going to jump in. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to jump in and maybe while folks are thinking of questions, just raise one myself and say, first of all, amazing presentation. You covered the year of tariffs so far, as well as ways that companies are navigating. My question is, you guys work with so many companies that are facing this issue. One of the biggest things on this webinar that our businesses ask us at the World Trade Center or in this setting in the Q&A is sort of crystal balling it, like looking forward, helping them get a little bit ahead of what's coming, or to go on offense. Like, how do they have strategies, which you've covered pretty well? And I'm curious, what's the biggest volume that you see come through, and the one thing that you're like, I wish businesses just did more of this, or this best practice would help you just so much in this tariff process, right? So I'm curious your thoughts there.
I would say certainly since April of 25, I would say we could 24/7, we could be doing duty mitigation, the different strategies, looking at the classification of the goods, looking at the valuation, helping companies move country of origin. We've done a lot with, particularly, look, if it's a simple product, then you can't, but more complex products where you have, let's say, components from China, components from Vietnam, production steps in both countries, where can you move so that country of origin is Vietnam and not China? Because China, certainly for the rest of this administration, the duties from China are going to be higher. So, with where there's a PCBA board, for example, in a product, moving important components like that and important production steps, because the country of origin is determined on what is the essential character of the product and in what country is it substantially transformed. So we've done a lot of that over the course of this year. And then what companies now, like as we're heading into the end of December and we expect a decision in January from the Supreme Court, is gearing up for those actions. I am cautiously optimistic that there will be a refund process. And I think it'll be either administrative and judicial or just judicial. Or maybe just administrative. But administrative would be filing the customs protests, or judicial would be filing a complaint in the Court of International Trade. But in either case, companies should be getting their list of entries where they paid IEEPA duties, just so they have their arms around what their exposure is and they're ready to go.
Thanks, Laura. Any final questions before we jump off from anybody? I don't see any in the Q&A right now. Great. Well, it's going to be another really interesting year in tariffs. Hopefully, maybe a little calmer than this past year, but of course, with the Supreme Court ruling coming, who knows what's to come. So,
well,
thanks for being here.
Thank you. I just want to say one last thing. In terms of 2026, I think the headline is going to be whatever happens with the Supreme Court, and then the administration, we know, are ready to go with additional sectoral tariffs, and so we're going to see, that roll out.
Yeah,
so that's going to be busy.
Yeah. Yes, we're counting on it. And like I said at the beginning, that's why we will continue having these webinars every week. Laura, maybe you can join us again sometime next year to share some additional insights as things continue to change. Thank you again for your time today. And John, of course, thank you for being with us and for connecting us with Laura. Really appreciate all of you joining us again all year and today. Enjoy the next couple of weeks. I hope everyone who's on is able to take a little time off. Enjoy the holidays. And like I said, we will be back with our tariff webinar on Friday, January 9th. Happy holidays. Have a great day.